Technology needs to take another big jump after what SaaS has done over the last 15 odd years.
So is AI that next big kind of transformational leap in technology for accountants?
AI appears to be like this silver bullet, right?
You can jump on the AI bandwagon by developing your own product, or you can just do an iteration of one of the various ChatGPT type products that's out there, right?
Yeah.
You went, no, let's not do the easy way, let's do it the hard way.
We asked ourselves the question, is it possible to build AI that understands the context of what someone spent company money on?
If you were to start the whole thing again tomorrow, what's the key thing that you would do differently? Today, I'm joined by Nicolai Thomson, CEO and co-founder of Jenesys. He tells me about their AI tool, Jacko, and how it's revolutionizing bookkeeping, why they built their own AI infrastructure in the first place, and how AI can free accountants to focus on growth. Plus, we discuss the key to striking the balance between human and artificial intelligence. And Nicolai, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's great. I'm looking forward to talking about Jenesys and Jack and everything, all the cool stuff you're doing over there. And of course, it's not the first time that you've been involved in Sylvan. You were involved in a panel at previous digital accountancy show with our founder, Lisa. So it's great to have you back talking about AI, because obviously, as you can clearly see, it's a topic that's very close to our hearts. So for those that are kind of unfamiliar with Jenesys and its AI capabilities, do you want to dive a little bit more into the value your product is delivering to customers and what I guess what the problem you're trying to solve is?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, the last couple of years being on stage with Lisa has been some interesting conversations, and for DAS this year, that's happening really soon. We're not having quite the same conversation, but there's going to be a new angle. So really forward to chatting about that with everyone at DAS. So hopefully those out there, you can join. The problem really, as we understand it, is that the industry is under a lot of pressure to continue to deliver bookkeeping data that's used for a lot of other reasons. There's both price and consistency of accuracy issues, and how long it takes to get figures to a client. And for those that are building and have got existing advisory services that are trying to do more than just the P&L result, I think what I really see and hear a lot of from businesses is that, hey, we need data faster, and I need to understand how to action some of these insights that you're talking to me about, and give me more help with business admin. And the accountant is always going to be the person to help those businesses, and it is the right person. But when you're stuck in just processing compliance and doing pre-accounting and fretting about the accuracy of that data, it doesn't leave a lot of time. And we're all still humans. We all still need sleep, and we need to eat and take holidays. And many of us have got families, and that's never going to change. And so technology needs to take another big jump after considering what SaaS has done over the last 15 odd years, to take on more of the workload and augment the skill sets that so many of you have got out there.
So does that make AI the next kind of clear evolution of accounting technology? Because I kind of look at the accounting technology went from kind of traditional, and then the next kind of big jump was cloud, and then the next jump is AI that next big kind of transformational leap in technology for accountants?
Yeah, I think AI has got a lot to do with the transformation, but at the same time, this transformation that has to take place, it's all about the workflow and how you do something. If someone just goes out there and says, oh, I need to put AI into the business, my objective is to become more efficient or to be able to grow without first hiring and taking on all that cost, because my plan for 2025 is to scale. AI appears to be like this silver bullet, right? And everyone's talking about it. It seems to be everywhere, and everything you read has got AI, but without sort of specific contextual understanding of which bit does what, because AI has been around for 25 30 years in different guises. And so the change that this has made is we've finally been able to start building technology that can learn from us and then apply that. So this is not a rules-based system, because a rules-based system requires a human to manage the rules. And so it's basically a ball and chain around your desk. You still can't leave it. You still have to manage every single task. And so if you just buy AI and stick it into your firm over the next 12, 18, 24 months, you're probably not going to see the ROI that you expected. Whereas this type of generative AI does require a bit of a workflow change, a change to it is a form of transformation. And I think that the biggest challenge for certainly some larger firms out there is actually going to be like everyone's just been through a sort of a cloud transformation, right? There's maybe some weary souls out there who have been through transformations, and it's like, oh, again, like really. But I think this is all about service delivery. I think it is about process at the end of the day. AI allows us the opportunity to change some of those processes, but in doing so, you are reviewing and you are possibly changing the entire cost structure for how you produce the bookkeeping or to produce any other set of tasks which AI has been built for. There's a lot of areas that have been developed. It's not just about bookkeeping. There's a huge amount going on in close or just client communications as well. So it is another good old fashioned transformation of a workflow. And I think for vendors out there like us, we want to be more than a vendor, more like a partner. Like we're also trying to figure out what the new workflow is, like how to redesign it. And that's some of the work that we've been doing over the last few months that we'll talk a little bit more about later.
Yeah, it's interesting. And of course, you guys as a business took an approach to build your own and develop your own product, right? So you haven't done what a lot of people have done to jump on the AI bandwagon. And I guess this is the interesting thing, right? There's two schools of approach to everything. You can jump on the AI bandwagon by developing your own product, but that's expensive, time consuming, and probably quite risky. Or you can just do an iteration of one of the various chat GPT type products that's out there, right?
Yeah.
You went, no, let's not do the easy way, let's do it the hard way. So what was the logic behind that, and how did you see that as the correct choice to address the specific needs of your users?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's actually a question that we didn't know the answer to when we first started this journey in January 2023. And so we've been going for 2 years now, and a lot of people will know that like we still don't have a product in general release. Like we've had early adopters and essentially a beta program running for the last 5 months. And so it's taken us a long time to answer some of these questions because previously no one had built tech to do what we've attempted to do and what we've almost pulled off. And this is where you've moved orchestration, or the logic, out of a SaaS app, which has been designed with a human operator assumed to be present, i.e. the bookkeeper, physical person, using a tool, and moved that into AI, where it can learn from you and make its own decisions, and you be able to validate that data. So your role fundamentally changes. Now, Jack 1, as we call it internally, which we launched kind of around about May in 2023, was based on ChatGPT. Like we did use that as a wrapper, just like kind of everybody else ran off and did. And we learned a lot about GPT, what then became GPT-4, and the limitations. And the biggest problem we found, which was everybody was talking about at the time, is hallucination, like hallucination risk. And where you're dealing with, like we deal with numbers, right? And the number is a 1 or a 2. There's no room for a reasoned based model to go, well, maybe it's 1.8 because I like it, and it's a black box of. Now, when you're dealing with exclusively words and you're trying to be creative, maybe you're writing a sales script or some marketing, like there's a lot of room for creativity. And that is what LLM's large language model, clues in the title of its product name, excelled at. They were fabulous. But what we found is that when we were trying to mix numbers and words in those early days, we were getting lots of hallucinations. We were getting unexplained things. And so at the time, we decided to, if I can just geek out with some terminology, like so writing SQL queries, we figured out how to write a single SQL query to incorporate both numbered based response and and work and word based work. And we spent the second half of 2023 with this as like, hey, here's our baseline. And then it was around Christmas of 2023 when we realized we'd moved a whole bunch of logic out and we put it into to move that orchestration, that decision making capability into AI code, into Python. And it was then that we realized just how different basic engineering has to be to build AI that can make decisions without a human inside that workflow. So the role of the human as the validator sits outside of that workflow. And it actually led us to, in February 2024, almost a year, basically a year ago now, to rebuild our entire backend. And that was a tough decision to make because it was like a whole year of work just sort of gone. But it also meant that we realized, because we often get asked this, like, well, what happens if Intuit just comes along and just does what we do, or Xero does? And my answer has usually been, yeah, they could. But we realized in Christmas 2023 that they would have to rebuild their backend in order to do so. So the probability of them doing that is very, very low. And so that was just became a technical and engineering challenge, which was interesting learnings. But it all comes down to this issue of hallucination. And so what we realized needed to be built, which only took place in October 2023. So a couple of months before we realized that we'd have to rebuild the back end, is that actually there's a concept called in-context learning, which is giving AI the context of like so much more than just like, here's an invoice, like lift the characters, right? That's OCR technology. Well, what about the context of VAT legislation? What about the context of the account codes that need to be chosen in order to reconcile this document? Or what about accounting standards? What about internal company policy? Like, is this thing allowed to be claimed for? Well, whatever. And it was that was a journey which triggered a whole new train of thought of actually what we've ended up with is Jack is not a model that has got lots of big training. It hasn't cost millions of dollars that we need to recoup in fees to train it with lots of expensive GPUs, which is the hardware that gets used. And we don't have to get our hands on hundreds of companies' ledgers and train the data, which has been the way that AI has been built over the last 3 years. And so none of that exists. And that's why we had to build our own infrastructure, because we had to figure out how to have a self-learning capability that took its learning from the human input, from training, being able to learn the nuances of how each client's chart of accounts need to be managed, because a business's DNA can be found in their accounts. And so everyone's different. And so you can't take a general model like an Anthropic from Claude, other way around rather, or a Chat GPT from OpenAI, or a Meta model or a Mistral model that are out there and just sort of point it at bookkeeping. It's not possible to get the kind of results that we would expect and that we're going to need to trust to do this, to be in this workflow long term.
So it's interesting because you've built something that, in essence, and I mean this in a broad sense, right? In essence, could be seen as a replacement for a person, right? Like this could be something that could replace a person. So
Yep.
From a business perspective, from an SMB perspective, great tool, right? Like you've potentially built something that they can utilize, because obviously I think one of the things you say on your website, this runs 24/7, right? So humans don't run 24/7. We need to stop, breathe, sleep, whatever.
Yep.
But from an SMB perspective, it's a superb tool. You've got this kind of really interesting ability to deploy a 24/7 bookkeeper. And hey, wouldn't every business like that? From an accountancy perspective, though, is there a fear? Or no, let me rephrase the question. How do you overcome the fear that this is going to replace people within that firm? Because we see
Mm.
this all the time, right? This is one of the big things.
Yeah.
Every person we talk to about AI, one of the biggest fears is it's going to replace the human with technology. I have my own thoughts on this. I don't want to lead you in that direction. But when you're talking to accountancy firms, how do you overcome that and allay that fear for those people that could potentially be impacted?
So when we talk about, oh my gosh, AI going to replace me? First thing I'd say is, well, can you write down on a list, on a piece of paper, all the tasks that you do, all the different types of things that you do, from client engagement to helping colleagues internally to, yes, also doing some of the functional work of like, hey, I need to do some manual data entry. I also need to make some decisions on account codes. I need to correct a whole bunch of errors because I've overused rules, um, et cetera, et cetera. Or I need to manage my offshore team to do this work because all this transactional accounting still has to take place. And I would challenge you to like split it up into, okay, what are the tasks that you like least? What are the things that you are not very good at, and what are you really good at? And when you split up your work day or your work week by the types of tasks that you do, that is how we've been thinking of this as we built Jack. So we've been thinking a lot about the tasks that a human is first of all completely dependent on. So what are the like the I'm not going to call it low hanging fruit, but what are the things that we're completely dependent on? Like you can't use any tech to help. Um, and then work our way through. And so we work task by task of taking that off you. Now, there will be a limit to the number of tasks. Like we are not going to take your client out for lunch. Jack can't do that. Jack can't have a conversation about hobbies and interests as you develop client relationships. Jack's not going to be able to help a colleague with a task which has got nothing to do with bookkeeping. But when it comes to the majority of bookkeeping tasks, there's a lot of tech out there that, yes, they're rules based, but does a like 80-90% good enough job, right? Most of our transactional work is already coded. So what I am not that interested in is a new tool or a new AI that does an extra 5%. Like, oh, it gets me to 97%. Wow, that's wonderful. So that's not the point. Um, but being able to influence and train an AI how you want your client's set of accounts to be run, and for you to be able to see the evidence of that work, that's different to the tools that we currently use. Because every time you open up any number of tools out there that I'm sure everybody knows and uses, um, you start a task and you end a task, and then you have to redo that same thing again next month. And so AI needs to learn from a few examples that you complete, and then start to do that on your behalf, like almost like as a reflection of your work. And so your time becomes an investment, which is a really different way of thinking about how you actually structure your workday. So that you start to have more time to grow the business. That is for AI. Like, why would you bring AI in? The first version of AI, of if the problem is, hey, I need to become more efficient and reduce my cost, or I don't have enough time to do all the bookkeeping, for we started to use some tools, and that helped us. Then we started to look for a lower priced person who's based offshore, and many people have done a really great job of integrating those teams into their workflow. And so at the end of the day, you did that because you are growing your business. And so AI is for companies that want to grow, that want to take the next step. That actually I have an ethical issue with the idea that an offshore person is just lower priced. Like that becomes a race to zero. I think that's really disrespectful. We've got a lot of skilled people all around the world, And if we continue to just drive down the price, then we're going to start exploiting people. And I think that's a terrible position to be in. And I think no one in the industry wants to do that. And so AI needs to step in, and start to replace the answer of, well, can I just find a cheaper human? Well, no, you can't, but I can find a more efficient human. And so for many people, using Jack is actually about giving that tool to their offshore team to say, right, now start using this, to be able to grow without having to put another 5 people at desks.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's a really, really good point. I think for me, I always look at time lost in a business, right? So if you look at an
Yeah.
accountancy firm, how much time are they losing by doing stuff that actually, back in the day, we go back to the before Receipt Bank launched. How much
Yep.
time were we chasing and then scanning or inputting? And actually, whilst the fear then was, well, if I use a tool to do that, we can't then charge that out. And it's actually, I think actually no, you still can. You're still doing that work. You're just doing it in a more efficient way. And I think one of the biggest challenges is certainly in the smaller end of clients. There's only so much revenue you can maximize or release from a client, right? Like you can do X and
Mm,
Y and Z. So you can't, if you've got a portfolio of small businesses, there's only so much revenue you can kind of maximize from those businesses. So how you grow your practice is you've then got to add more clients, right? And you can't do that if you've got a load of people doing jobs that actually they don't need to do. So for me, is if you replace the kind of the day-to-day stuff that can be automated, you take those, because who spent all that time doing all those qualifications to sit there inputting receipts on a, it's crazy, right? Like
yeah.
surely there's so much more you can do. And that's what I love about products like Jack, is that it's, for me, it's taking those automatable tasks, the stuff that you can do um with machine learning, with a computer, with AI, and actually saying, right, now you've got this time that we can grow the business, we can grow our relationships with the clients, we can really maximize what we're doing. So I love that kind of, I love those kind of solutions that solve that problem. And for me, I think something like this could be the Dex, the receipt bank of this generation that kind of unlocks another load of capacity so people can go out and do more and more and more. Because receipt bank didn't, as far as I'm aware, the implementing receipt bank didn't cause bucket loads of redundancies, and if anything, quite the
Exactly.
opposite, right?
Yep. And look, for anyone who's recently had to put a job ad out to like find a bookkeeper, will probably know how challenging that was, and the types of people who are applying for those roles. And yes, sometimes they're not a good fit. But the overseas operators have got exactly the same problem. Quite often I get told, well, in the given year, there will be several people who will touch my clients' books because their bookkeepers are on a professional development journey to become an accountant, because they're doing that because there's a lot of stability and opportunity and prosperity as an accountant in our industry. But also it's, well, there's businesses, there's people at the other end of that. There's families and mortgages, etc. And doing what we do to help a business grow and to stop a business from failing. And I think that there's a huge amount more focus that could take place on helping a company manage their costs. It's not always about, well, the solution to get me out of trouble is to sell more, when a problem that's sitting right in front of you might just be the result of bad admin. And I see this quite often, where a business that's not doing its financial admin well, is not managing its costs well, they're not aware of where their cash is, and just getting management information or like a P&L and L and a balance sheet 2 to 3 weeks, whatever, after month end, whenever that turns up, isn't really going to help them. And even if they look at it, like, how does that tie into them completing a set of tasks? And so, like, I love the conversation that's going on at the moment around, like, we need to do more advisory. And I think a lot of people need to ask themselves, well, what's the definition of that? And therefore, what's the data that I need and how often do I need it? And so when we started this 2 years ago, we asked ourselves the question, is it possible to build AI that understands the context of what someone spent company money on in order to reconcile it to an internal audit standard in real time? And it's that real time bit at the end, which is, I think, unlocks a lot of opportunity to create the kind of advisory services that we talk about for business owners around the country and around the world to be able to actually understand what action do I need to take and be able to take it and see some tangible results. And so that's an area that we're also going to lean into quite heavily in the future.
So I guess last main question for me, and I've got a little sub question for you at the end. But you obviously you've talked a lot about your journey from Jack 1 to Jack 2 effectively, and how you went from Chat GPT to building your own and utilizing your own model. What's the biggest lessons you've learned along the way? And if you were to start the whole thing again tomorrow, what's the key thing that you would do differently?
If we had to start again tomorrow, assuming that we only knew what we knew 2 years ago, I don't think I would change anything. I might get a product manager in a little bit faster. But if I could start again knowing what I know today, that would make a significant difference. We spent a lot of time learning and messing up a few times along the way. Like Jack itself has actually been rewritten 3 times. It's we've learned a lot. So that as a team, we've built up a lot of knowledge and understanding. But at the end of the day, like this is just technology. This is just a bunch of code. To quite often we're dealing with clients who like they don't want to do their admin. They don't send documents in. It is really difficult to get a bank statement with a bunch of Amazon, knowing what the hell did they spend money on. Like that's a lot of stuff that we burn time on. And how do we solve that? And it's going to be quite a long journey. Like from an AP point of view, Jack is actually doing a pretty good job right now of AP, and we're about to release bank reconciliation, which has been a few months late. But my gosh, there's one thing I've learned is that this world with AI and what we're building is a little bit more like pharmaceutical, like research, where you know what the outcome is that you need it to do, but you're not quite sure of the exact mix of all the things that need to go in it. And that's what we found ourselves in. Um, and so it has forced us to realize that Jack just on its own may not be the answer to everything. And so we've responded, and I've not talked about this publicly very much, but we've created a service that we call Jackpod. And Jackpod is taking Jack as a piece of software and the service which you get from a human as a qualified bookkeeper. And we put the two together. Now this might not sound like anything revolutionary, but take an iPhone. Like Apple control the hardware and the software, and when you use an iPhone, it just works. There's a few other examples like Tesla cars. They make the software and they make the hardware. There's a few interesting examples out there, but when you control and manage both, sometimes it just works. And so we spent 6 months figuring out how do we transform the workflow, and we are going to productize that, and we're going to give it away to anybody that wants to go through that transformation journey of like, well, what does it mean to change my workflow and to adjust the costs and help me to grow without having to first hire. We're going to give that away. But in the meantime, there's a lot of stuff which we do to handle the bookkeeping and to get to close, which AI is not going to do for a good like 1, 2, maybe even up to 3 years. There's certain things, certain tasks that it just won't do. So Jackpot is a response to a lot of people that have looked at Jack and said to us, yeah, this is great, but like, can you guys do the human bit too? Like, can you, and it's just, can you outsource the whole thing? And our answer now is yes. And it's called Jackpod. And yeah, you can outsource bookkeeping. We use our own technology. We also, use the ledger that you currently use with your clients, whether it's Sage, QuickBooks, or Xero. And we will handle getting documents from your clients. We will give them tools to make it easier, like WhatsApp, like Slack, like Teams. So we're starting to build a few of the key things that have been missing, just to get the communication backwards and forwards and make it easier to get those documents in. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that will relate that actually a lot of time gets burnt on stuff which our tools today just don't currently help with, or very
Yeah.
few do. And so we've brought these together so that you can move on and use the data which month-end close produces to create the services that that clients need, to focus on the compliance and tax services on that side of the business, without getting bogged down in having to hire people, manage them onshore, offshore, either, and provide them with tools, know which tools to buy, implement them, onboard people, just everything that's contained, so much more in hiring of people and buying technology, that instead you can just take the whole lot from us, and it's called Jackpod.
Love that. So last question, what is your go-to favorite, I could not live without it AI tool?
Yeah. It is actually Claude right now. I use Claude to review contracts that I get. I now no longer just go straight to the lawyer, because I get eye-watering bills. We've actually written part of our initial playbook for Jackpod using Claude. I remember when we first started looking at Jackpod around August of 2024. In about 2 hours, I turned around a 38-page onboarding document, which ended up being total overkill. But it was this wonderfully structured document that covered just about everything from templates for customer communication to SLAs and KPIs and who does what, all written out. And it took me about 2 hours. And I remember thinking, man, that would have taken me days of dedicated work to produce something of that size. Now, thankfully, that's now a document that is a third of the size that we use, and that we give to someone to say, hey, this is how we work, so that it's clear. But yeah, Claude is, and ChatGPT I don't use anymore. It's they've not kept up. Maybe when GPT-5 comes out, all of a sudden I'll lose my loyalty to Claude and switch back.
Excellent. Well, Nicolai, thank you very much for your time. It's great to talk to you, and I look forward to seeing all the developments with Jack moving forward.
Hey, Phil, thank you so much for having me. Really great to chat too.
You've been listening to the Silver Linings podcast, which was written and produced by me, Phil Hopton, and Lara Bolsonaro. The podcast is edited by Lee Stallard and Nomad Video. If you'd like to find out more about Silverfin, you can visit us at silverfin.co.uk or check us out on LinkedIn.